Hello, everybody. Easy E, Eric Bischoff, co-host of 83 Weeks each and every Monday, your favorite podcast. But my favorite podcast right now is Count It Out with Mike and Tyler. Great to be here, gentlemen.
Listening to Count It Out with Mike and Tyler.
Well, we are live, pals, and welcome to another edition of the Bill Apter Seal of Approved Count It Out with Mike and Tyler. My name is Tyler, and this week we are going to be doing something a little bit different. The original plan was for Mike and I to do a show together, and we were going to discuss the career of Psycho Sid, who we unfortunately lost last week. We were also going to talk a little bit about Kevin Sullivan, who we lost a couple weeks ago. A couple really sad events and a couple of the greatest of all time. I mean, if you want to talk about minds in the business and his work in Florida with Dusty Rhodes, Kevin Sullivan was on a different planet. And I dare you to find a more impressive looking professional wrestler than Psycho Sid. Absolutely incredible. Look, and we're going to get really deep into that. Hopefully next week is the plan. Card subjected to change. Unfortunately, Mike and I could not record together this week. So I thought we would do something a little bit different. With the Netflix documentary of Vince McMahon coming out soon and the trailer finally being released for it, I decided to go back into the archives of Count It Out and pull out a bunch of footage of some of the prior guests that we've had on the show talking about Vince McMahon. Now, I do want to start with a big disclaimer. All of these interviews that we have done and all these clips that you are hearing are recorded before the allegations and the terrible news and events that we have heard and the terrible things that Vince McMahon has allegedly done. And I'm just going to use the word allegedly very loosely because, he has not been proven guilty by a court of law, but I don't want to sugarcoat it either. They're disgusting accusations. And all of these interviews happened before these accusations have come out. So, take some of these comments with, maybe some opinions have changed over the 4 years that we've done some of these interviews, but nonetheless, Vince McMahon is a polarizing person, and we're going to hear from some people from his past, and I'll give you a couple names here. We're going to hear from Jimmy Korderas, Jumpin' Jim Brunzell, TJ Wilson, Justin Credible, Chris Harris, Jaques Rougeau, C.W. Anderson, Gary Michael Capetta, Jimmy Jacobs, Vince Russo, our friend Rory Fox. I don't know if I said Jaques Rougeau or not, but he's on there too. Ardo Kell. All these great clips that we've had from some people talking about Vince over the years. I figured it's topical with Netflix, and we will be back at it next week. So without further ado, enjoy some of the great content that Count It Out has provided over the years. And if you want to hear more of it, go to our YouTube page. Please subscribe. Head over to Spotify. Please give us a follow. All of this stuff helps. Chris Van Vliet is not lying. He says this every week, and he is a genius. Please help us out. Spread the word so we can continue putting out great content for you. And let's go to the show. And of course, probably the biggest promoter in the history of wrestling is Vince McMahon. What are some of your favorite stories about being around Vince, and how did you and your brother end up over in the WWF?
Well, they were recruiting and they were trying to get the best talent of all the territories and all the provinces and all the countries. And so we were lucky to be chosen there. And I remember the limousine picking us at the airport in LaGuardia. And then we went to Stamford, Connecticut to meet Vince. And I'll never forget the time where we were sitting there and I finally got the nerves to ask him, after listening to him, what he was proposing to us. And then I put my mind together and then I asked him, I said, what are your plans with us, Vince? And then he looked at me and he says, the sky is the limit. And it was so funny because when he said that, the sky is the limit. Me and Raymond were going like, wow, like this is like an actor going to Hollywood. This is big time. And then I realized down the road there that a lot of guys were told the sky was the limit. but at the time, it was just amazing. And he was very, very, very impressive to be around. He was a very, very smart man, and he was a businessman. He knew how to make you feel good. He knew. So when it was good, it was good.
Is it true, Jimmy, that back in and maybe even to the current day too, that Vince McMahon wants the referees to call it like a shoot, and if they do disqualify a talent, that there's a cash bonus for the referees?
I don't know about the cash bonus thing, but
so that's what you read on the internet, at least, right?
Of course. There have been times where you get performance bonuses, where but I wouldn't call it a cash bonus for yeah, but Vince would tell everybody, listen, the guys need to also listen to you out there and not treat you like you're non-existent. So he would tell us at times, look, if guys are not listening to you and you're counting out there, count them out. I have your back.
So,
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And we're on the topic of Vince McMahon right now. Obviously, probably the most influential man in the history of professional wrestling. What's it like being around Vince McMahon? Do you have any Vince stories? Did you have a lot of interaction with him? Any good Vince stories?
I don't know. Good Vince story. I got to see him every week at TV. So, you saw Vince. So instead of, for me, it was like, I don't know, do I call him Vince? Do I not call him Vince? Do I call him Mr. McMahon? I was always like on the fence kind of thing. So I just walk in and see him and say, hey, boss. You know what I mean? But he was easily, when he wasn't busy, because, he's running around doing, Vince stuff all day long.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, boss, you got a second? Can I ask you a question? Sure, pal. What do you need? Like he was easily approachable. And yes, it's very intimidating going up to him. He has this intimidation factor. And I know a lot of guys, including me, felt a little intimidated walking up to him and talking to him. But at the same time, he was very open and he would listen, and whether he agreed with you or not is a different story, but at least he'd be open to your suggestions.
No pressure working a spot with Vince at WrestleMania, right?
Yeah, no pressure at all.
Right?
None whatsoever. Oh my God, man. Oh my God. His advice was, hey, make sure you hit me. And I was thinking, man, I have to. That's what's gonna break my fall.
When I see that spot that you guys did at Mania, it reminds me of the story that Brett tells when they're in the gentleman's club and they're doing all the finishes on Vince and Jim's sitting there going, the Hart Foundation would have laid it in.
Dude, it was exactly that. I was like, what's happening? I gotta close. I remember when Vince is the one who laid it out. He asked if I'd ever done the finish up the top to the outside before. And I lied and said, yeah. Yes. When would I have done it on a live event? What are we talking about? So, and I just remember thinking in my head, I'm going to have to hit him. He's going to have to take a lot of this to break my fall coming from up there. And then he said, you better hit me. All right.
You got it.
I already was going to, but now I just have verbal affirmation saying we got to do this.
Okay, then you're probably going to get in more trouble if you don't hit him, right?
Oh yeah.
With your role in the WWE now, what's the biggest difference in working with Vince as a talent compared to in the producer role?
I mean, it just happens for me, from where I was as a talent. Now, if I'm a guy like, let me think, like Roman Reigns probably deals with Vince every single week. But me as a talent, I wouldn't always deal with him. I'd go after a match, I'd go see him and he might say, hey, good match, and just shake my hand. It might be that quick. A lot of times he might have advice, or once in a while. One time I got yelled at. I can think of one time I got yelled at. It was funny. It was when I was teaming with Cesaro against Orton. I slipped on the springboard. He wasn't yelling at me about slipping. He's yelling at me because I was rushing around, because I was very nervous wrestling Randy. Randy's someone I hold in high regard, and I only wrestled him that one time. I was very nervous. My timing was really bad in that match, like really bad. It's really bad in the Randy Cesaro portion of the match too, where I grabbed his, my timing was bad that day. The next day we wrestled Cena and Bryan, and I was equally as nervous, but we were told not to bump Bryan, and this is the same thing. It's the first time I'd ever wrestled Cena in my life in a match. So anyway, like with Vince clotheslining him, I'm like, I have to lay this in. And of course I'm wildly nervous, man. Like, what am I supposed to do? I have the boss told me to hit him, so I had to hit him.
During your run in the 90s there, when you were doing a bit of work as a singles, you said Vince asked you to come back as kind of on standby.
Sure.
Did you ever pitch any ideas to Vince about doing more than that, or was it just kind of that was what you were doing and that was it?
Well, here was the best idea I had for him. I said, Vince, I says, I know that you take some seriousness about my interviews. I said, why don't you come out when I'm doing an interview and complain about it? I said, I'll beat the shit out of you. And then I said, we'll come around afterwards and I'll put you over in all the towns. And he looked at me and he says, Jimmy, he said, that'll never happen. That was my suggestion to him.
That's the greatest thing I've ever heard.
Oh God. He and I just didn't get along. It was just,
well,
and then Brian was so afraid. Oh, God, Vince, this and that. I said, So
the business decisions made by WWE and Vince McMahon in the last year. Well, we need some background before we get to these decisions. We need to go to your background and your history with the McMahons. Can you tell us your relationships with both Vince Sr. and Jr., and be it professional or hostile, what led to you working with either men, and what led to you leaving the company in the first place?
Well, Monsoon brought me into the organization.
That's right. Yes.
So,
but did you ever work with Senior like full on?
Sure.
Or were you only working?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Senior, when people compare Senior and Junior, they always say, "Oh, Senior was the gentleman, and Junior, he didn't care about you." And I don't know. I think the only difference is that Senior had other guys carry out his dirty work, and Junior didn't really care what you thought about him, and he just, what you saw is what you got. I mean, ask Bruno about how Senior blacklisted him early in his career, before his career got started, and almost pushed him out of the business. So Senior was now came across as more gentle, and he was more gentlemanly, and he dressed a very fine way. And if you didn't cross him, there was no problem. My favorite Senior story, Vince Senior story, is I was doing their TV shows. We would tape 3 shows in a night. So we would tape them every 3 weeks. And so the first one would air the first week, then the second one the second week. So I thought I should have been getting paid more than I was. Now, this is back in the late 70s. I was getting paid probably somewhere between 40 and 60 bucks. And so that's for 3 one-hour shows. So if you put 3 into 40, I was making like $13, $14 a show. And it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but I thought I should have been making more in the 100, 100 and a half range back in the 70s. So that was, I just thought that would have been fair. So I decided this one day that I was going to go in and I was going to talk to whoever would talk to me and asked for a raise. So the first guy that I went up to was Junior, and he said, I don't handle those things. Go talk to my father. So I said, oh, okay. So now you have to understand that I was teaching, I was an educator.
Yeah.
And I didn't need wrestling to earn a living. So it was just a sideline for me, as opposed to everyone else who, and that was their living. So their living depended upon McMahon. So whether you were an opening bout guy or you were a headliner other than Bruno, you had to be really careful about what you said to him. Because if he got rid of you, you would have had to have moved your family to another part of the country if you were able to find another territory that would take you. I didn't have those kind of concerns. I wanted to continue. I loved what I was doing. And honestly, probably I was so stupid that I didn't realize that asking for a raise in the wrestling business was such an amazing, incredible, maybe even stupid thing. So in between the hours that we were taping, I went in. I'll speed my story up. I went in. And I was prepared for whatever he said. I had a comeback. I had an answer, and I said to him, Vince, this is what I make. I think I deserve more money. I was prepared for anything he was going to say, except for what he did say. Because his response to me was, sorry, but I can't afford it. So now this is the owner of the WWF, wrestling, a gazillionaire.
Yeah.
And what do you say to that? And I was speechless. And I just sort of said, oh, okay. And I turned around and I walked out because I didn't know I don't know how to respond to that. That night, at the end of the night, Phil Zacco, who was the payoff guy, came by. I always got paid in cash the night of. He came by with my envelope. He gave me the envelope. When I opened the envelope, he gave me the raise. He gave me what I asked for, but he couldn't tell me that I deserved it. That's old school thinking. The fear is, and you know what, to a certain extent, WWE is still run this way with the mentality of, well, if we put you over too much on a personal level, then you're going to start taking advantage of us. So nobody ever told me that I did a good job when I worked with them. Not once in 11 years. The idea was, well, if I'm still here, I guess I must be doing okay.
Yeah.
If they haven't fired me, then I guess I'm doing well. And every 3 weeks after that, I got the higher amount of money. So that's my favorite Vince Sr. story. Just so like I couldn't remember that huge match that you were talking between Sting and Flair, but this impacted me, like a good 10 years before that, and certain things hit you in a certain way.
Absolutely.
And those memories like stand forever.
And what was it like, the transition moving from working for Senior to working for Junior?
There really wasn't much of a difference. The only difference happened was when, as I said before, Monsoon lost his power.
Okay.
I didn't realize, and a year or two after I started is when Howard Finkel started. And I didn't realize at the time when it was happening that, because I now believe that Junior thought of Howard on his team and I was on Monsoon's team. I didn't realize they were different teams.
Right.
So I was never a favorite of Junior's, and I don't know why, but and it may just have been that I was brought in by Monsoon. I owed my career to Monsoon, and not to him. And therefore, my allegiance, my loyalty would be to Monsoon and not to him. That's the only thing I can think of.
Not that he had any reason to be, but do you feel like Vince may have been threatened by Monsoon at all?
Honestly, I don't know, because you'd have to go behind the curtains and, be in on the meeting of the partners. And I really don't know what the dynamic was. I know everything was very cordial in front of me, but that's just in front of me.
Yeah.
And I also don't know. Remember, Monsoon and Junior's father went way back.
Right.
I think if you talk to Junior today, he wouldn't say that the times that when I worked there, that was his company. It was his father's company. When WrestleMania 1 hit,
yeah,
that I think is how he sees, or maybe 84. That's the beginning of WWE in his mind, because that's what he created.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump forward over 40 years, and now we're in 2023, and the biggest story of the year is the fact that the WWE has been sold to this Endeavor company, and under this TKO Holdings umbrella. What was your reaction, and were you surprised by Vince, quote unquote, letting go of his baby and selling, or were you like, no, this is business. This is something Vince would do, or were you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised.
No.
Look at his age. I mean, what? I know that he thinks he's going to live forever, probably, but I mean, just realistically, and then also the bad PR that he's caused the company, and I don't know. He probably looks at things like, oh man, the good old days. You could have just, like, paid them off cheap and moved on.
Yeah.
And now they're holding me to account. We're not looking at a change, or this isn't something that's just developed. This is the way the guy's been. That's who he is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know that he recognized that he began to be a liability to the company, but yeah, I mean, how many years can you do it? I mean, and when I say do it, I mean lived it. He, give him his due. He lives his business. There's not a moment in the day that he's not doing something, having to do. I mean, even when he's relaxing, he was thinking about his business. So, give him his due, in that. But no, I'm not surprised.
Is obviously because of how much of an impact Stone Cold Steve Austin had 25 years ago. You were there for a lot of that, Vince. Looking back, do you recall any specific moments with Steve where you knew you guys had something real special in that man?
Man, I knew it a few times, man. Bro, the bottom line is, originally Vince did not want Steve Austin to say a word. Vince was not familiar with Stunning Steve Austin. He was not familiar with any of the stuff he did in ECW. And that's why he had DiBiase there, and that's why he was the ringmaster. Vince did not have a clue who Austin was. So those were the marching orders he gave me. And, every week at TV, Steve would come to me and say, bro, you got to find me an opportunity. You got to find me a little hole to show what I could do. Persistent, nonstop. So that's exactly what happened, man. I found a spot to put Steve on commentary. He put the headsets on, and I tell people this all the time, bro. In 3 minutes, he made himself a multi-millionaire 10 times over.
Do you have any good Vince McMahon stories? Any interaction with Vince that you could talk about?
Oh, I have a couple.
Kemper Arena, I had to wrestle Heidenreich on SmackDown, and who was my producer that time? Okay, no, Dusty Rhodes was. No, Dusty was the Umaga match. Ted DiBiase was a producer for that match, and I get in the ring with Ted, and I get in the ring with Heidenreich, and Vince goes, "Yes, where is the extra?" And I go, "Hello, I'm Rory." "Hi, I'm Vince." Thanks to God, no shit. But yeah, that was it. That always popped me when I went over to introduce stuff. I said, "Hello, I'm Rory." "Hello, I'm Vince."
No shit.
Maybe you don't know who this guy is, right?
Yeah. And the other Vince story is I was so bummed out. I knew the school teacher Matt Stryker from the ECWA tournament. I did the Super 8 tournament in 2005 or 2006, one or the other. But I made that connection to him there, and I also met Loki there. So that was a good connection. I knew Stryker. Right? ECWA, no, Super 8 tournament.
Oh, Super 8 tournament. Sorry.
Maryland.
Yeah, sorry, I mixed up my tournaments there.
Yeah, but anyway, I saw Matt Stryker there. I'm like, he's got a match on Sunday Night Heat. I'm like, yes, I'm gonna get a 6-minute match with Stryker, and we're equal size, so I'm gonna finally can showcase what I can do. And then I got the pat on the shoulder. It was already written on the board by Sergeant Slaughter. I got the pat on the shoulder. He's got Umaga. Fucking Finley. Finley changed my match, so I got a 2-minute squash on Raw with Umaga. And I was freaking jacked. My traps were up to my ears. I was like, I could have been like, you had Hardcore Holly and Crouch Holly. I could have been little Brock Lesnar's brother. I could have been little Brock Lesnar or something if I would have buzzed my hair up because we look so similar. And I did the 2-minute squash match on Raw against Umaga, and I go through the curtain. Not here. Great job, Rory. I was like, wow, fucking Vince McMahon's telling me great job, Rory. Like, okay, cool, I got a job. No, I just got a great job, Rory, from Vince.
Does Vince have that? Because you always hear he has this aura and presence about him.
He did. But believe it or not, I was not as nervous because Vince was a lot more. He was more one of the boys back then. Like I had a relationship. I think a lot of us did back then, where I could pull Vince aside and have a conversation with him, or go into his office, which I had done many times. Where today, I think a lot of the younger wrestlers, there's the way it's structured is a bit different, which I find odd. But back then, Vince really had his hands in all sorts of creative, where he had personal relationships with everyone up and down the card. You know what I mean? It wasn't this big, 100-man roster. It was it was much less. So, if you had a problem, you'd go see Vince. You wouldn't, you know what I mean? It's not like today, So, it was cool though. It was amazing to work with Vince, and he was a very scary, intimidating person. He was the boss.
Well, and I think in terms of meeting Vince McMahon, I only met him twice, honestly. The funny story that I have, though, and I've heard this from 3 different people. I choose to believe it. It may or may not be true, but I've heard it secondhand. Okay. So people often ask me, how'd you get your name? Like, how'd you go from Ardo Cal to Kyle Edwards? Right. So I get there. I knew my name was going to change. I didn't care. I was like, whatever. I know this is part of the gig. I'm cool with it. So my boss, Tom Carlucci, who's a fantastic human being. He was there for a very, very long time, like 20 years plus. His whole family at some point worked there as well. He tells me, look, your name's going to change. Let's put together a list. So with the international department, who have a lot of talented people, we put together this list. And obviously some people were like taking it more seriously than others. Like I was like, okay, you know what? I think there's like a 2 first name convention that happens here in WWE, like Tom Phillips, Justin Roberts, Josh Matthews, Michael Cole, Jim Ross. Like whether it's their real name or not, like that seems to be like the convention that happens among many on-air talent. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do that. So I'll put like Ryan Randall on the list, or I'll put, I thought Turk would be a cool last name, kind of like an homage to my heritage, right? Yeah, and I thought my parents would love it too. So I was like, okay, Dan Turk or John Turk or something. I don't know. Turk last name. I just put a bunch of Turk last names. And some people in the international department were like, Ray Donovan's on the list and like Armin van Buren's on the list. So they're like picking real people's names and they're not taking it seriously at all. And I'm like, Armin van Buren, there's no way that I'm like, what do you think? Come on. So anyway, so we've all heard the stories that Vince McMahon is very hands-on. Like everything goes through Vince McMahon. And that's honestly one of the reasons why WWE's been successful, because there's only one cook in the kitchen, right? Like Vince McMahon is the be all and end all. Apparently this includes what a lowly international announcer's name's going to be. So they're in this meeting where I can only assume that they're talking about like high level stuff, like what direction should we take the company? And here's some marketing pitches that we've received. And here's some investments that we should do. And what is the creative for WrestleMania, whatever. And then the topic comes to, all right, we hired this guy. His name is Artist from Canada. We need to change his name. Here's the list. And so, like, I don't know. It just makes me laugh. And again, I've heard this from 3 different people. He takes the list and he looks at it, and everyone has a Vince McMahon impression, right? So he's like, I don't like any of these names. You know what we need in this company? God damn it. We need a Kyle. So as soon as you hear that from Vince McMahon, like when Vince McMahon says something, it is gospel in WWE, right? So like, okay, my name is Kyle. Like that is 100% set in stone, apparently. So that's essentially how the name Kyle Edwards came to be, was because Vince McMahon was adamant that we need a Kyle in this company. And well, I became a Kyle.
It's so strange if that's the name that just came.
I don't know where he came from. I don't know if he was watching a show and there was a Kyle on it. I have no idea where the inspiration for Kyle came from, but that's how I became Kyle.
That's an awesome story. That makes me laugh. You know, if they could have asked him that on the next day and your name could have been Frank. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
we don't have any Franks. Name him Frank. No, Kyle.
So you got to.
I never saw Vince didn't throw tantrums. He didn't like lose his cool, more or less. I don't know if I ever saw Vince like, Vince would go, God damn, like that. I mean, Vince was a psychopath. Don't get me wrong, like full on, like crazy person, legend. Vince McMahon's a legend. Like everything I say about him was with the utmost love because he's a freaking legend, but an absolute lunatic. Gabe would just throw like short bursts, like short temper tantrum bursts. Vince was more like a petulant child when he was upset. It was like if Vince was upset, it was like that was your day. Your day was with like a bothered Vince where you could say nothing right and do nothing right. That Vince was difficult to be around.
When we had WrestleMania 10 with the moms, and we had this screw job from Vince to me, where he promised us for 4 months that we were going to beat the moms at WrestleMania. That's what was our big falling out of me and Vince, actually. And when we got the 1 hour before the show, and we'd been beat everywhere in the world, Carl and I, like by even middle guys, like 1, 2, and it was hard on us. But then they kept telling us, don't worry, guys, because when we get back to WrestleMania 10, you're going to beat the moms with your big move, and you're going to get all your recognition and your street value back up. So, but an hour before the match, we were told by Pat, that Pat came to see me, and he says, Jacques, he says, listen, he says, we're thinking about doing something just a little different, the DQ or something. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, because, he says, if we beat the moms tonight, he says, what's going to be left for them? And I was saying, well, I don't give a shit. Yeah. I like the moms. But for 4 months, we've been squashed by middle guys, and stuff, because you told us that we're going to win our credibility back. So that was our falling out. So then I went to see Vince in the dressing room. And I said, Vince, up to where do you have me booked? So he took his big book out. And for 2 months, I was finishing Israel, I think, in Tel Aviv. So I said, okay. So I said, don't book me after that.
What are some of the major differences between, the backstage vibes in TNA and Impact compared to your time in the WWE? And did you have any interaction with Vince McMahon at all? What was he like to be around?
I went up and introduced myself, and I bet he didn't even know who the hell I was.
Really? Wow.
It was just that kind of atmosphere. It's very corporate. The best way I can describe it is they just want to control you. I mean, they treat you like a robot. They just want to program you to fit their needs. And, by the time I went over there, I'd been wrestling for 15 years. I mean, so I was kind of, had my own thing going on and just wanted to apply it into their company. But TNA just felt more like a home, more like a family. And I feel like, since it was a young company, everybody was really pushing to make it work and to make it, as the best it could possibly be. And with the WWE, it's just, you're just a soldier. You're a soldier in this big corporation.
Overall, I hated it. When Tommy called me that day and said WWE wants to hire you, I was like, bullshit. They don't want to hire me. He goes, no. He says, really? They do. He says, we're bringing ECW back. He says, Paul and I are going to run it. We got control. Vince has nothing to do with it. We're going to go back to our running small towns. We're going to go back to picking our feud up with me and you. You're going to be one of our top heels again. He'd only want like 11 or 12 of the originals. You're one of them. So are you interested in signing? I'm like, he said, the money is shit, but it's the base pay. He said, but at the end of the year, you get all these bonuses and it'll, quadruple on what your base is. I said, so I don't have to go to Ohio Valley? He went, no. I said, you guys are in control? No, Vince? He goes, yes, we have complete control. I said, well, I'll sign in. And a lot of us, the originals, Danny, the FBI, Franny, we all signed. And after the first night at the arena, I wrestled Sabu, and Vince saw it on video and hated it because it wasn't a WWE production. It was ECW production, which is not WWE. We're different. We're darker. We're grittier. We're grungier. And he took it over. Then he started bringing his guys from WWE and putting them in there who were not ECW. They want to see ECW originals. And it was just the absolute shits from there on out. It was horrible. I hated being there. Francine hated being there. I got one TV spot with Punk. And after that, I luckily got hurt, so I didn't go back. And I remember there was, because you had to be there. So it was luckily I got hurt because it was a miserable experience. I hated being there. Francine and I would find out, you have to get there like 11 o'clock in the morning for the show. Didn't start at 7 o'clock at night, and then you didn't get over to 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. So it was all day of doing nothing. When we find out we weren't on TV or weren't doing anything, she and I would dip. We'd get our bags and we'd sneak out and go to the next town and just couldn't wait to go home. Not only was I getting paid shit, I was losing money being on the road because I had to pay for my hotel room. I had to pay for my car. I had to pay for my food. So I wasn't hardly making anything. And I remember when I got hurt, I was in bed because I blew my L5 and S1. And I'm laying in bed. And their doctor calls me one day and he says, Vince wants you to come back to work. I said, I can't walk. I can barely walk. He says, well, when you come back, we're going to give you some cortisone shots to get you back in the ring. I said, you probably don't know this, but I was a high level baseball player. So I know what those cortisone shots do to your body. I said, and I am not taking them damn shots. He said, well, we got a new type of steroid and he just tried to put it over it with something new. I was like, no, this is bullshit. I'm not doing it. He said, well, if you don't come back to work, Vince is going to fire you. I said, good. I hate being here anyway. Tell him I'm not coming back and he can fire me. So we hung up the phone. A few weeks later, Johnny Ace was on the phone and said they were going to have to let me go. He said, we're just going to have to let you go right now. It's not been working out. And I went, sweet, thank you. He was kind of taken back from it. And he goes, yeah, but maybe down the road we can revisit. I'm like, nope, that's okay. No, thanks. I said, can I go back to Japan? He goes, well, you got a 90-day compete clause with M or TNA. You can't go there. I said, that ain't a problem. He's like, well, I know you'd love to be in Japan. I said, good, because I'm going to go back. So they let my release go or give me my release. And then like a month or so later, their lawyer called me. And he said, Chris, we're just letting you know you can't use C.W. Anderson anymore. I was like, bullshit. I said, why is that? He said, well, we own it. I said, no, you don't. He said, well, Paul gave you that name when you got the ECW. I said, you might want to check your facts. I said, I was C.W. Anderson before I got ECW. I've been C.W. Anderson since 1993. I said, it's not his, it's mine. He got quiet on the other end and he said, well, I'll call you right back. 15 minutes later, he called me back. He goes, yep, you're right. He said, you do own it. So, son of a bitch. Yeah, tried to take my name. They took the other guy's name. They didn't take mine. But yeah, it was a miserable experience.
The goal.
Vince and I never did get along.
Oh yeah.
We were involved in a couple lawsuits where I was against him, and I won them. I won both of them. Although he did wind up firing me 3 times. So I guess he came out at the end, but I came out at the end too.
You did something that the United States government couldn't do. You beat him in court.
Oh, geez, I tell you, it was he postponed everything, and it was, I don't want to get into it, but there was a original contract that we signed, and all the boys signed it, and it was misleading in the facts of the mathematics of what we were paid according to what we got and to actually what was in this contract. So it worked out for the best of us, but Brian Blair thinks to this day the reason why we're not in the WWE Hall of Fame is because we sued him. I says, come on, Brian. I says, but a lot of people have asked us, how come you're not in the WWE Hall of Fame? And I said, well, Vince, for one thing, I said, I'll take all the heat. I said, he hates me. And I says, I don't hate him, but I don't care for him.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you about the Hall of Fame. I think that everybody I worked with for months and months and years, they're all in the Hall of Fame. And I think that Vince, if I had a message to send to him, if ever it gets to him, it's like, Vince, you shouldn't choose your Hall of Famers by the relationship personally you have with them, but by the talent and what they gave to you in the business.
Stone Cold wasn't the only major Attitude Era star to get back in the ring at WrestleMania this year. Vince, when you were watching WrestleMania, what was your personal feelings when you saw both Steve and the chairman, Vince McMahon, back in that ring?
Yeah, first of all, bro, I got to be honest with you. I the only show I watch, and it's because I get paid to watch it, is Raw. So okay. I haven't watched the WrestleMania in years, and I'll be honest with you, because I don't care. Like I could care less. But however, I did go back and see the Vince footage. I felt bad for him. Like it's like bro, a lot of what Vince did after I left, like, kind of really, really surprised me, because Vince was always very conscious and aware of carrying a certain air of himself. Vince loved people fearing him. He didn't make them fear him. It was just, he's Oz, so people feared him. And then as I saw him perform later and later on in life, to me, he was just a former shell of himself. And I was just surprised by that, because I don't know why he would have been want to be seen in that light. I know I wouldn't have wrote for him that way, and I wouldn't have produced him that way. And quite frankly, I would have protected him as best as I could. So I don't know, bro. Listen, man, maybe they did it for ticket sale. I don't know why they did it, but I don't think it's something I would have done.
Well, thank you to all of our prior guests. Different looks, different things to say, different experiences with the man. The Netflix documentary will be coming out soon. I don't know how I feel about it. Obviously all the content they recorded was before the allegations came out as well. And again, I use that word very loosely. Just disgustment, but whatever. That's a different story for a different day. We will check that documentary out when it comes out on Netflix. I'm sure we'll talk about it on the show. And that's it for this week. Stay tuned. Next week, we will be talking about Psycho Sid, hopefully. If not, we'll talk about something else. Mike's been working on a cool list as well that we're going to get into in a couple weeks. And stay tuned. Always some interviews that could be on the horizon. We're always working on things that counted out. It's getting to busy season. I know it's only September, but this is when I start working on the year-end show. So leave a comment. Let me know what you think should be on our year-end show this year. It's my list this year, top 7 moments inside of the ring. I don't do backstage stuff for our year-end show. I like to keep it positive. So the top 7 moments in the world of professional wrestling. Let me know what you think. Let me know who you want to try to get on the show. That would be great. And please subscribe. Spread the words. Tell your friends. And on behalf of Mike, who could not be here this week, and on behalf of all of our great guests in the past, you have been counted out. Cheers.